I've come here personally as the leader of the world's largest economy and the second largest emitter to say that the United States of America not only recognizes our role in creating this problem, we embrace our responsibility to do something about it.
For the moment, let's put the hyperbole to the side. Climate change is real. It's happening right before our eyes. Whether you believe we're getting warmer or preparing for a deep freeze, we are the generation that needs to come to a simple conclusion, stop blaming each other, and get to work solving the problem. But when the President of the United States seems to be a larger part of that problem every single day by not addressing the core of the issue, we may as well just start preparing for saltwater beaches in Kentucky by the end of the century, all right? His latest column nails it, entitled 2015 Paris Climate Conference, Another Bad Deal for America. Welcome back, the veteran syndicated columnist whose work can be read at Newsmax.com, professor of business at the University of Maryland, Peter Morici, joined by the veteran financial advisor and editor of the High Income Factor, who can also be read at Newsmax.com, Tom Hutchinson. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining us. And Peter, I'm going to begin with you. New York Times this morning, the blaring headline, 2/3 of Americans want U.S. to join Climate Change Pact. As soon as I read that, I'm thinking that's 2/3 of Americans who aren't seeing and aren't hearing exactly who the real problem is here. Read China and India, yes?
Absolutely. China and India together emit about 33%, 35% of the total pollution, even more than that. And yet they are not committing to reducing their emissions. This deal gives them license to keep increasing. You know, by mid-century, we will certainly have handicapped our economy, reduced what we emit, by essentially sending our jobs, our factories, our economy, our wealth, our opportunities to China, because they won't have to play by the rules.
All right, Tom, let me get to you, because handicapping our economy, Peter makes some great points there. And of course, we know that China doesn't care. India doesn't care. But would you agree then that the more we send to China, the worse it's going to get, not only here at home for our economy, but for the planet itself when it comes down to clean air?
Right. Look, it's a matter of jilted priorities. Look, we're swimming in debt. We have ISIS to worry about. And the fact that this is what he's focusing on is more of a problem than anything else. The priorities are distorted.
But is the big issue here not necessarily that this is what the president is focusing on, but when he says that, okay, we're going to admit that we're part of the problem here, he doesn't in the same sentence say, China, you're a bigger part of the problem. India, you're just as big a part of the problem. He always seems to leave that out, Tom. That's the big issue here that we need to be focusing on, yes?
Yeah, you know, look, it's only one planet. It's like if somebody else is smoking on an airplane, it doesn't matter. Smoke's going to go in the same place. It's a tube. If you can't get China and India to go along as really the chief violators, the agreement is more or less pointless. And time should be better spent on, if that is the ultimate goal, on how you can get them to comply in a more meaningful way. Otherwise, it makes no sense.
So, Peter, let me get it to you then. Why then are so many in the media so reticent, so hesitant to put that right in the president's face and say, wait a minute, you're talking about sending, at the end of the day, it's still sending jobs to China. They're going to pollute more. They don't care. You never mention it. Why doesn't somebody push him on this, Peter?
Well, I think the left doesn't really care about heavy industry in America. You know, things like steel making or car making or so forth. I mean, Harvard doesn't train aerospace engineers. They're not much interested in it. They think that America can make its way in the world by writing poetry, and that the folks that care about these issues are just a bunch of raving protectionists. But that's silly, and there are meaningful things we could do. We could impose higher emission standards in the United States. That's fine, but let's require that products that we import be made with the same technology and the same carbon footprint. If we did that, the Chinese products wouldn't get in unless the Chinese cleaned up. It's the same principle as, for example, would apply to child labor. I don't like the fact that we use soccer balls from Pakistan made by kids or Persian rugs from the Middle East made by kids. We shouldn't admit those products unless they're made by adults and they're paid according to international labor standards. The same should go with the carbon footprint of all products that we use.
You're talking about something that has been on my plate for a long time here, and that's the use of child slave labor around the world, which basically nobody pays a tremendous amount of attention to. Certainly not our government and a lot of people here who buy those products. Tom, let me come to you then here for a moment. we're talking about this, but let's stop talking for a minute. What's the answer, in your opinion, Tom? How do we then push this forward to where it actually is getting something done? We're cleaning up the environment, and we also hold the nations like China and India to bear, to bring them to heel.
Well, Peter's exactly right. We need to use our leverage with China. We send them almost $400 billion or more than $400 billion a year in our trade deficit. We have leverage. We're not using it for this.
Then why don't we do it, Tom? Are we just in the pocket of the Chinese? Do we have a president here that likes just basically being a lapdog for the Chinese?
I don't know why they don't do it. I think for political reasons, it's more expedient this way. And which brings me to another problem for the whole agreement. It's really more about intention than achieving actual results. It's more about saying, we did this. And here we when it was our time, we took a stand and went here and did this. That's the important thing to the left, not the actual results.
All right, Peter, I only got 30 seconds left, and I saw you sit back and smile when he said the word intention.
This is really not that enforceable agreement. We have a lot of trouble getting China to live up, for example, to its World Trade Organization commitments, for example, on currency. There we have a real dispute settlement mechanism, and we could impose real sanctions legally. With regard to this global climate agreement, they make similar kinds of promises, but all we really can do is call them to a meeting and say, well, gee, you haven't slowed down the growth in emissions like you said you would. You're continuing to spoil the planet. What are you going to do? We know how well the Chinese respond to that kind of pressure. The reality is China's a bully, and we need to treat it like a bully. It's time for Peter's 2x4 with the nail at the end.
Peter Morici, Tom Hutchinson, I want to thank you both for joining us. Don't forget the article, 2015 Paris Climate Conference, Another Bad Deal for America. Read it at Newsmax.com. Thank you, gentlemen.